Hey guys, Level Cap here, and we're quickly approaching the Battlefield 5 reveal. Tomorrow, Wednesday, May 23rd, we will know a whole lot more about what's coming with DICE's next installment. The next game is a very important iteration in the Battlefield franchise, as it'll indicate the design direction of Battlefield probably for years to come. There have been multiple indicators suggesting that this Battlefield is going to change a lot when it comes to the general gameplay. And there's no questions that in order for Battlefield to stay competitive with all the new games coming out, they may have to evolve some of the core elements of the game. The big question is, how are they going to change the core elements, and will they cater to veteran players, or will it be aimed exclusively at growing the player base with new blood? Battlefield 1, although highly successful on the sales front, also drove a lot of the core community away from the game, leaving players like myself a bit salty, but also searching for our tactical FPS experiences in other titles. Obviously, DICE wants to make both veteran players happy, but also make an exciting title that they can market to new players trying to figure out what game they want for the holidays. And although Battlefield is being revealed on the 23rd, the game is still very much in development, and there's always time to refine the game into an experience that will make both veterans and newbies happy. In today's video, I'd like to talk about questionable game mechanics in Battlefield 1 that the next title could remove entirely or change in order to improve the experience for everyone. It can be easy to forget, but Battlefield 1 actually made some excellent improvements to the general gameplay, including a minimap that no longer tracks gunshots and a menu spawning system for vehicles. Both of these changes solved major gameplay issues that had been plaguing the franchise for a long time. However, there's still plenty of mechanics either added, exacerbated, or even ignored in Battlefield 1 that I'd like to discuss now. Why don't we start off with some of the big ticket items that have been discussed before but really warrant reiteration. Behemoths. These Levolution replacements are pretty much there for the spectacle alone. Whether it's the airship raining death from above or artillery landing down from the hated dreadnought or armored train, the gameplay mechanics are just bad when it comes to Behemoths. Almost all of these giant vehicles require mechanics in which you can't anticipate or fight against the random death that will kill you at any moment. Especially when fighting against something like the Dreadnought battleship, the average infantry has almost no options when it comes to fighting them or hiding from them. Now, of course, sometimes they can be killed extremely fast, but in either situation the fun factor just isn't there, and the service provided was annoying at best. In my hundreds of hours of playing Battlefield 1, I think there's maybe been a handful of games in which the Behemoth actually brought a losing team back to win a round of conquest. So, for the most part, all they really tend to do is prolong the inevitable in an incredibly annoying way. Now, some of the alleged leaks suggest that Behemoths are coming back in the next Battlefield, and if that is in fact true, then I would request that DICE redesign them completely to create more dynamic gameplay rather than functioning solely as random death generators. The next big ticket item that has been discussed quite extensively are the elite classes. They look cool, they bring unique weapons to the battlefield, but they replace a battle pickup system from Battlefield 4 that was pretty much superior in every way. The extreme health bonus of elite classes allows for some pretty big exploits when used with a dedicated medic. In addition to that, you can never drop an elite kit, and fighting against them sucks, especially when you completely outskill an elite player but still end up dying. You get minimal points for doing damage to elites, so if you don't get the kill, your efforts are not properly rewarded. Now, the previous pickup system was a good way to place overpowered weapons in the game and limit the quantity, preventing their abuse. When using the picked up weapons, you were still a normal soldier, so you could die just as quickly, and your killers could then pick up your elite weapons as a reward. I hope the next game goes back to this pickup system and maybe put some of the indirect fire weapons into this system as well. Mortar spam could easily be fixed by making the mortar system a battle pickup rather than a kit that everyone can spawn with. Now let's get into a little bit more of the nuanced gameplay that probably had a negative impact on the overall Battlefield 1 experience. The melee system has been getting progressively worse since Battlefield 3. BF3 introduced the insta-kill animated takedown system. This could be activated when sneaking up behind a player. The only problem was that players could exploit the system by jumping past you and activating it for an instant melee kill without needing much in the way of aiming skill, or skill in general. Battlefield 4 added an additional frontal takedown animation that could be countered with a properly timed button push. The only problem with this system was that it was super buggy, it looked incredibly stupid, and it also lessened the skill required for melee combat. Battlefield 1 kept the Battlefield 4 frontal takedown, but removed the counter. However, it required that the melee damage had to be fatal in order for it to activate the animation. The problem with this, of course, is that again, it required little to no aiming skill to activate a frontal takedown. The current melee system really allows us to look at past titles and see exactly how the skill curve has dropped over time in exchange for QuickTime event takedowns to make Battlefield look cool in trailers. Rather than trying to innovate the melee system, I would suggest a complete reversion to the way it worked in Bad Company 2 and call it good. Most multiplayer games still use an older Counter-Strike style melee system, and it works just fine. Not every game has to feel like a movie 100% of the time. We all know we're playing a game at the end of the day, and good mechanics will stand the test of time where cinematic systems get old very quickly. Next up is tank teamwork. To kill a tank in Battlefield 1, you need a considerable amount of teamwork, but to keep one alive, you don't really need much. Battlefield 4 required a lot of teamwork on both sides of the armored warfare. The self-healing mechanic in Battlefield 1 makes repairing too easy for the solo tanker, and even easier if you actually have a dedicated repper. Reverting tanks to a state where at least 2 players are required for maximum effectiveness, especially with repairing, is a good way to encourage teamwork and reward the team that uses more of it. So I hope we can get rid of this self-repairing mechanic introduced in Battlefield 1. Alright, now let's touch on the gun mechanics in Battlefield 1 that frankly drove a lot of veterans away from the game. In a big effort to make each weapon feel unique, DICE changed some of the core mechanics of how weapon spread worked. Without getting into the details too much, as an entire video can be made about the gunplay in BF1, I would just like to see things changed so that headshots can come back as an important part of aiming skill. The spread in BF1 is so extreme with automatic weapons that aiming for the head is no longer a viable tactic. The new spread not only lowers the overall skill curve, but also allows for cover to create an even bigger advantage for defensive or passive players. Ironically, getting better at Battlefield 1 gameplay makes me considerably worse when jumping back into older Battlefield games or even other shooters, as it encourages bad habits. Games that allow skilled players to pinpoint focus on weak points of enemies' bodies allows for a much higher level of skill and aiming and sort of combat experience and knowledge, where Battlefield 1 kind of takes most of that and throws it away with the new spread mechanics. Now, on a personal, probably a little bit more of a pet peeve note, I wouldn't mind seeing the sliding mechanics going away either. Not only does sliding feel super Call of Duty cheesy in a Battlefield game, but the sliding animations and hitboxes never felt great. I know some people have come to embrace the new sliding system, but to me it pushes Battlefield further away from a military game and makes it feel more like every other over-the-top arcade shooter. Now, continuing on with the gunplay, as an extension of gunplay, the grenade play is one of the most complained about things in Battlefield games, and yet Battlefield has some of the worst grenade spam since Battlefield 2, if anybody remembers. Anyone who played the early rounds of the original Karkin map knows what I'm talking about. In Battlefield 1, the addition of gas grenades, incendiary grenades, continued use of impact grenades, overall faster detonation timers, and worse indicators of blast radius has turned the gameplay into a throw first, shoot later style game. And that's after DICE nerfed grenades. Part of this problem is attributed to the fact that a lot of Battlefield 1 revolves around maps that are too small or too choke-pointed for the amount of players in a given area. So grenades plus mortars turns the gameplay into something that doesn't even come close to resembling what I think of as a first-person shooter. DICE, please, for the love of God, if you only make one change in the next Battlefield game, can it please be to reduce the grenade and explosion spam? Let's talk about the sweet spot mechanic. Again, something that's been hotly debated. The sweet spot was introduced to add some admittedly much needed variety to sniper rifles, as Battlefield 4 really struggled to differentiate bolt action rifles from one another. Now, I personally think that the sweet spot isn't a great mechanic. It's hard to know when you're at a sweet spot range, and most sweet spot kills occur because of happenstance rather than meticulous positioning. Even with the recent patch designed to convey this information better, it still feels more like a random mechanic. That said, I'm not totally opposed to keeping it in the next Battlefield game. Snipers used to be pretty heavily outmatched in Battlefield 4, but they got massive bonuses in Battlefield 1, mostly because every other class got horribly nerfed. If the next Battlefield game bumps the effectiveness of all weapons to what they used to be in Battlefield 4, then the sweet spot mechanic may give the Scout/Recon class the needed balance to compete. But I still think that something should be improved when it comes to the UI to let Scouts know when they are at a sweet spot range. Perhaps a hot and cold indicator for spotted targets to let you know how far away you are from that sweet spot and allows you to maybe adjust your range before taking the shot. Now, the last item on my list is something that I've almost given up on mentioning, but why not just bring it up for old time's sake? Battlefield 3, as much as I love the game, introduced two of the worst mechanics in the Battlefield franchise. The first one I already mentioned was the animation sequence melee system, and second was suppression. Now, suppression has gone from awful in Battlefield 3 to annoying in Battlefield 4 to complicated and annoying in Battlefield 1. Lacking any sort of decent communication system for knowing when you're suppressed, if you're suppressing someone, and how much you're suppressing is barely conveyed through the game's in-game system. I respect DICE for trying to evolve the shooter in new and interesting ways, but their implementation of suppression has been poorly communicated from the start. The mechanics have become so complicated and convoluted in Battlefield 1 that it becomes difficult to incorporate to your gameplay in a meaningful way. Also, it greatly affects classes like the Medic and Scout, while Support and Assault are barely hindered by it. It also rewards shooting first over accuracy and reaction time, which is terrible for creating a skill-based shooter. A complete rework of the system or removing it entirely would be preferred, but DICE has stuck with it for 3 major titles now, so if I had to guess, it will probably make a return in Battlefield 5. If DICE was willing to compromise on suppression, I would ask that suppression information be conveyed better and perhaps limit the suppression effect to the support class only, so they're the only ones that can suppress other players. People have suggested doing some cool things like giving 3D spotting to scouts only and suppression to supports only to try and better differentiate the class roles, and I kind of like that idea as it lets DICE keep suppression in the game but less prevalent. Anyway, as much of the Battlefield hype and news seems to revolve around the theme of the next game, I think it's not really going to matter too much to a lot of the veteran players as long as some of these core mechanics don't change or aren't updated in good and meaningful ways. Let me know what you guys think about my suggested changes. Do you like them? Do you not like them? Would you make small modifications to them? Do you have different ones that you think are more important? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.